I grew up on a farm just down the road. I know most everybody in town. And
welcome to Americana on Tour. I'm Dan Barth, and this week, with the help of Living History Farms in Des Moines, Iowa, we take a look at North American agriculture from the Indian Age to the present. The first inhabitants of the North American continent were hunter-gatherers foraging for fruits, vegetables, and game. Eventually, these Native Americans learned to plant seeds and raise crops. They went on to develop a planting and harvest system and a storage method of drying and preserving food for future use. With these measures, they graduated from a primitive subsistence level to a more civilized existence. The pioneers arrived and began farming, borrowing agricultural techniques from the Native American. Relying on hard work and Mother Nature, these ambitious farmers planted on a larger scale, hoping to increase crop yields and exchange surplus for modern machinery. The pioneer woman's life was one of hard work and few comforts, but in spite of the hardships, her presence lent a civilizing touch to an otherwise crude existence. By the beginning of the 20th century, agriculture turned to the mechanization of the Industrial Revolution. Here at the 1900s farm, we were privileged to have Don Kelly with us. And Don was a farmer in the first waters with horses, right?
Yes, that's right. That's the way I learned to farm with, was horses.
Don's going to guide us today on a little horse-drawn agriculture. And Don, would you give us a little background of horse-drawn agriculture and when it finally faded out?
Well, I started to farm with horses in the late 1930s when I was still in high school, and I think it was about the early 40s is when it started to phase out. It phased out pretty quick after World War II and came in more popular with the John B. tractor and a few things like that. Well, this morning we got in a load of hay. We had a little trouble with the fork, but we're going to try it again this afternoon. We should get 1 or 2 loads in. Here on the rack is Jeff Harkin. He's one of the staff here at the 1900 farm, and Luke is one of our interns here for this summer. Well, this is the equipment we use to cut the hay. As you notice, the McCormick Deering sign on the stick there sticking up, and so McCormick Deering's been around for a long time. The sickle bar cuts about a 6-foot swath, so it takes quite a while to get a lot of hay cut. Of course, it's pulled with horses, and this is what we use at the 1900 farm. It was a piece of equipment from about that era. Well, this is the equipment we used to rake the hay up. It was in the early 1900s, and this is the Dane side delivery rake. This company was later taken over by John Deere, which is the company we know of today. Earlier in the we used a dump rake, which dragged the hay along and then dumped it to make windrows out of it. This was an advancement in that it rolled the hay off to one side. It operated a little faster and was also a lot more convenient to operate. Well, in 1900, the typical farmer probably would have had 4 or 5 milk cows. Then he would have had about 6 draft horses, which is what we have on the 1900 farm here. And then he would usually carry over, probably had 3 or 4 yearling and maybe a couple 2-year-old steers that he would have around. And then he'd usually have a few sheep, maybe 8 or 10 sheep. They always raised chickens, of course. One thing I should mention about the animals in 1900, the hogs were the primary cash crop. The farmer fed most of his corn to the hogs, and then he usually butchered a couple for the family and then sold the rest in town. And that was the way he got the money he needed to buy his machinery and equipment and some of the things around the house.
And actually, I shouldn't be seen like this with my sleeves rolled up, because it was a very ugly scene for the women in 1900 to be seen by other people with suntan. So the bonnets was a major item that you were to wear. So I should roll these down. And I would also like to mention the petticoats, if I can, really help absorb the sweat. So I'm probably a lot cooler than what most people are if they had shorts on. If I were out working in the garden and I had my hat, my bonnet off, my sleeves were rolled up, and maybe if I had a couple buttons done at the top here, I would probably be considered a hussy. It was a very ugly thing for women to have suntan. So they did protect themselves from the sun.
And from the neighbor's gossip.
And from the neighbor's gossip, right. Yep, no doubt. The women, their work, well, it included the gardening, taking care of the chickens, feeding, butchering, of course, and it was left up to the men for cleaning out the chicken house. The men also would feed the hogs and the sheep, the cattle, and the horses, so the women pretty much stayed away from that. And also the women's job was cooking, ironing, and laundry, and cleaning house. When the children were about the age of 6 or 7, that's when they would be divided. The females would be doing the female mother's role, and the boys would be helping their father about that age with the horses and cultivating, basically the outdoor farm chores. And the garden itself was left up to the women for just about doing every chore that there was to do in the garden. It was the woman's job. But the boys would also get to help milk the cows. So the women pretty much stayed away from that too.
What I'm doing right now is I'm frying up some chicken. And this chicken is one that we did raise here. And in 1900, they would have been butchering that chicken pie the same day that they would have been cooking it. We had fried chicken then for dinner today. And for supper, we would have had the leftover. We're going to be saving that chicken for tomorrow so we don't have to fire up the stove. Keep it a little bit cooler in the house tomorrow. So that I'm using a wood cook stove. We do use wood in this, and also corn cobs. If we want a real hot fire, we'll stick corn cobs in there. But we use this stove for cooking all of our noon meals. And we do baking on Wednesdays and then also on Saturdays. So we're using the stove then as well. And we do all of our canning. We do about 300 to 400 quarts of canned goods each year, and we're doing it all on this wood cook stove. So the cook stove is real good for cooking on, but as you're probably noticing now, it's also a real good source of heat. And in the winter time, this is the only source of heat that you do have in the house. Unfortunately, it's the same way in the summer too. So if it's 100 degrees outside, it could be about 115 degrees. So it gets pretty warm.
Isn't that wonderful? Come on there. Now we got the best part. quiet they are.
The use of horse-powered machinery dramatically increased efficiency on the farm, and agriculture became big business. This greater productivity allowed a new level of comfort for this new breed of farmer.
We have 5 rooms that you can go ahead and go through. This room here being the kitchen, the main room of the house. We do all of our cooking in here on the wood cook stove. We also do our eating in here. It also turned into a family room. Children would have been doing their homework in this room, playing games in this room, and parents would have been reading newspapers, magazines, things like that. On through there, we do have a parlor. That was a special room of the house. You would have been using that on special occasions. Weddings and funerals would have been held in there. You would have spent time in there on holidays and also on Sundays. We have a parent's bedroom that you can go through. Make sure you notice the trundle bed and the sewing machine. A pantry and a back kitchen. And when you walk into that back kitchen, you're going to notice a temperature difference. And that's why we have that room that gets the women away from the use of stove.
When I was growing up,
To open our series in the Midwest, the most appropriate place is Living History Farms. The farms have been operating for nearly 25 years, and it is an extreme pleasure to have with us the founder and developer of Living History Farms, Mr. Bill Murray. And Bill, would you mind telling us the story of how this all came about?
Well, first of all, I went to the Smithsonian, and as I was going in the Smithsonian, they had a hard-powered tractor sitting in the window. As I looked at that tractor, I thought to myself, well, it's sitting there dead. Surely a museum should have a tractor doing what it was built to do, and that was to be out plowing. After that, I started in politics, and I ran for governor, and I ran for governor twice. I won the primary both times, but I was defeated in the general election both times. Shortly after I was defeated the second time, my wife across the kitchen table one morning said, "Why don't you try something else?" Well, I had been thinking for a long time that we needed to have in this United States a place where we could show how farming has changed, how it started out with the pioneer, and how it developed, and how the machinery companies put out new machinery. And somehow people should see that story and feel it and hear it. And since I had been defeated twice in the general election in Iowa, I had a lot of people who were interested in me. I'd had a lot of exposure. And I went to Des Moines and got some of the men with money and with influence to back our program and to be on our board of directors. And this was the way it started. And we went to Deere and Company's foundation and asked them for $60,000 for a program of authenticity. And they granted it to us. And that was where we started with the idea of hiring a man who would do nothing but see that we were accurate and do the research that would be necessary to make the 1900 farm, for example, ring true, and the Pioneer farm to ring true. And that start with the foundation, that money that we got from John Deere and from some of the other people here in Des Moines. For example, the man who beat me, raised the money to beat me in the last governor campaign, he has given $250,000 out of his own pocket, Joe Rosenfield, because he felt this was the kind of program that we needed in the United States.
Bill, you had started one of the first living history complexes in the United States, and the evolutionary example here is very, very graphic. Could you give us a description?
Well, one of the things that we wanted to do from the very start was to show change, the marvelous changes that have happened since the pioneers came here and developed Iowa, for example. And so we started out with first an Indian site, but then we went to the pioneer who came to Iowa and started by breaking the ground. And then, of course, we wanted to go farther, and we used the 1900 farm second. And this 1900 farm relates to a lot of the changes that occurred between 1850 and 1900. And now we have as the future, we're working on the farm of today and tomorrow. We want to show, not by actual development so much as by exhibits, what has happened to agriculture since 1900. And we have a solar center and a crop center where we are planning to develop the program of what happened after 1900, because there's been a lot, as you know, in the way of development, for instance, of hybrid corn, of big tractor machinery, of all kinds of new techniques. And these we will show beyond the 1900 farm in what we will call the farm of today and tomorrow. And you'll notice if you go to the 1900 farm, that things aren't just as neat as they would be in a museum. They are natural, because we realized that a typical farm, the man and the woman on the farm didn't have time to mow the lawn always exactly the way it would look today. They did the important things, but they didn't push neatness. So when you come to the farm, you'll see a typical 1900 farm.
Bill, what is your philosophy in projecting this farm?
When we started, we decided that if you wanted to make something typical, that when the people came there, they have to see it in operation. And that meant that they had to see the hay being made and being put in the barn. They had to see the tractors operating. When they went in the house, they had to see the woman making a dinner on the stove similar to the dinner that she would have made in 1900. We want young people, older people, middle-aged people to reenact the situations that existed in the pioneer times, in the 1900 times. And we'll also be interested in exhibiting the times of the future later on. Appraisals on the Indian sites, that gave me a feeling for the early days and how much change there's been since the early days. Because when I had an Indian land appraisal, for example, where we're standing now, it was 1845. 1842 to 1845.
My God.
And I had to get all of the information of what was going on in that period. And that gave me a feeling of the pioneer farm. And I thought, well, I know the experience myself of the 1900 farm up through 1920, but I needed to get the pioneer. And I did that by doing the research on the pioneer farm as indicated by these Indian land appraisals. I did 23 separate contracts for the Indian land appraisals of the Department of Justice, and I appraised 205 million acres in about 30 different states in the United States.
My word.
One of the things about the philosophy of this type of business is to have people doing things that are natural for them. When I was over in Sweden, I went to some of the museums there, and they had houses, but they didn't have anybody doing anything in the house. We felt that if you went into a house, if a woman went into a house as a visitor, she wanted to see something going on. She wanted to see the dinner being prepared, and she wanted to be able to ask about the recipe. She wanted to see the 1900 home situation being recreated, and that's what they're trying to do.
In the weeks to come, we will step back in time at Living History Farms, Des Moines, Iowa, and chat with the general storekeepers and the town doctor, and witness the evolution of farm life from pioneer times to the present. We will venture to the Old West, where the series will take you to abandoned gold mines and try our hand at panning for the elusive metal which drove so many to despair. We will visit the most significant military sites along the famous Oregon Trail for a glimpse of the everyday life of the people stationed there and the exploits of pioneers passing by on their way west. We will take you behind the bars of the frontier prisons to discover their role in the taming of the West and spend several enjoyable hours with our old friend Bill Cody for a personal glimpse of his world-famous grandfather, Colonel William F. Buffalo Bill Cody. Other episodes include a look at frontier entertainment featuring a performance at the restored Atlas Theater in Cheyenne, Wyoming, a visit to the Wind River Reservation for a look at the blending of Native American culture and European religion at their Episcopal mission, and a talk with mountain men for an inside view of the Rocky Mountain fur trade and its influence on the exploration of the West. We thank you for allowing us to introduce our series, and we invite you to watch as we bring the living history of Americana on tour into the homes of America. Thanks for watching us, folks. The success of our program depends on you, the home viewer. If you have comments or questions about our program, please write me in care of Americana on Tour, Congerville, Illinois, 61729. We'll see you next week. That's Americana on Tour, Congerville, Illinois, 61729. The story of the American farmer is the story of a quest for more efficient ways to provide food for an ever-increasing population. In farms of the future such as these, scientific farmers are experimenting with techniques such as hydroponic gardens and genetic engineering. The breakthroughs in these new frontiers of agriculture may hold the key to solving present food shortages throughout the world. We at Magic Lantern Productions dedicate this program to Dr. Bill Murray, founder of Living History Farms and the patriarch of the living history movement in America.